And good afternoon. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I want to start by acknowledging what a difficult time it has been in our country. But more importantly, I want to recognize that for our Black friends, student athletes, coaches, staff, neighbors, and colleagues, systemic racism has always been a part of their lives. This isn't new to them. Over the last several weeks, I've spoken with our head coaches, many of our staff, alumni, and student athletes. And there have been a few common themes in those conversations. We need to acknowledge where we failed. We need to listen. We need to learn. We need to talk with each other, not at each other, openly, candidly, and respectfully. I commit to being better. I commit to our athletics family being better. And I commit to listening and learning. It's on all of us to do this work, to seek knowledge, and to truly understand how over 400 years of racism, oppression, and suppression against Black people has led us to the point where we are today. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, and so many before them were murdered because they were Black. Black lives matter. We need to make systemic change in our society. It needs to begin now, and it will be a journey that never ends. I also want to say a few words about Dino Babers. In some quarters, Dino was criticized for not making a statement earlier. In the past 2.5 weeks, and well before, Dino and I have had dozens of conversations, and as our conversations always are, they're genuine and they're real. Dino needed time to process, time to care and talk to his family, time to reflect, and time to hear from his team, as he discussed earlier today, and I respect that. I'm proud to work with Dino. I'm thankful he's the leader of our football program. I love having him as our coach. I love him more as a person and a friend.
Thank you, John. Appreciate the opening thoughts. Herman? We need you to unmute, Herm, sorry.
Okay, you have me
Thank
muted.
you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let me say that we are living in some turbulent times in our country and the world, for that matter. And for me, growing up in the inner city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, I experienced all sorts of trials and tribulations during the 60s and the 70s. Have I experienced racism? Absolutely. Do I believe Black lives matter? For sure. As a person of color who has competed as a student athlete in college and on the world stage, I saw the frustrations and I felt the frustrations. I have spoken to many colleagues and friends over the last 7 days. And what do I believe? I believe meaningful change along with education of the issues is paramount here and now as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Herman. Now we'll open it up for questions, and we'll start with Mark Larson from Spectrum News. And everybody asking questions, if you can direct them to Herman or John, they're both unmuted, but please direct your question to whomever you would like to ask. Mark?
Hey guys, nice to see you guys. I would like to try and get one for both. Herm, can I ask you about the student athletes here at Syracuse University and how much they should be encouraged to use their platform to speak out against racism?
No question, Mark. And as you know, here at Syracuse University, we have athletes from all over the world, for that matter, and we have a lot of them who are also from the States. And I would tell you that we have heard from them, and John actually hosted a Zoom with many of our student athletes as recently as earlier this week. And I think they are prepared to be able to use their platform to be able to speak about all the issues at hand.
John, I had a quick follow-up with you on another topic that came up this week about what we should call that big building formerly known as the Carrier Dome. Is it the stadium now?
Mark, it's the Carrier Dome. The name's on the dome. So, you know, that's what it is. Obviously, we're excited about the opening in the fall. We've talked about for 2 years a new stadium experience, but the name of the facility is the Carrier Dome, and the name remains the Carrier Dome. It's on the Carrier Dome. So that's the answer to that question. I just want to reiterate to what you asked, the question you asked, Herm, is we have encouraged our student athletes to use their platform and to do so to protest racism. And we support our student athletes' rights to voice their opinion and make their opinion known. And we said that on Monday, and we've said that many times prior.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Herm.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Donna Tatota?
Hello, I would like to ask a question to Herman and to John as well. And as important as I think the topic of racism is, there's something that I wanted to talk to you about with the COVID situation as well. I'm curious if either of you guys would prefer there to be a universal NCAA policy about testing, and going forward, what that would mean for your team that you are testing to go into other arenas or other stadiums and play teams that may or may not be testing.
Yeah, Donna, I'll start out, then Herm can certainly add on. I just think it's highly unlikely there's going to be a national protocol per se. We have talked within the ACC, the athletic directors in the conference office, in terms of creating a baseline threshold for competition that all 15 schools would agree to. I would hope that we could do that, and then that could also be shared with our non-conference opponents as well.
Donna, from my standpoint of view, I think exactly what John stated would be optimum. While it may be hard for everybody in the country to do it, I think it would be very, very easy for us to start with the conference and have all of our conference teams at least participate in the same type of testing that we're doing. And there's no question that we need our non-conference opponents to be able to test, because Syracuse, if we can declare that our student athletes are COVID-19 free, we would certainly hope that everybody we're competing against are the same way. So those things are very, very important to us. We believe that what we have put in place is ideal for us and our student athletes, and also for our community.
If I could just ask a follow-up, could you detail a little bit the kind of testing that you plan on doing going forward?
Yes, I can. You open up that door for me, so I'd be happy to talk about it. First of all, our testing of our athletes and our protocol really started about 14 days before they came on campus. So they received information on how to provide their temperatures, and all of that was recorded prior to them stepping on campus last Monday. Then when they got here on Monday, what we decided to do was let them all fly in, and then we put everything into place starting Tuesday, when they were all tested sometime between 9 in the morning and 12 noon. The particular test that we are utilizing is a saliva-based test, in which they provide a sample into a test tube, and then there's a solution in there, and then the entire test tube is tested, and they're out for testing right now. I could say to you that we were probably very aggressive in how we put together our plan, along with in providing that information to the rest of the university. John chaired the committee, along with many people from the university, as well as some of our people in athletics. And so once the test comes back, then we will put our student athletes in what we call pods. They will be in pods of 10. Those pods will stay together as a family for at least 15 days. And then after the initial 15 days, we will then perhaps correlate them and put 2 pods together. Eventually, over the course of the time, perhaps in 45 days or so, then we can put the entire team together. But we will continue to test as they come in every day for their voluntary workouts. They will still have to take their temperatures. They will still have to record it. And all of that is part of our process going forward until we start camp.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Next, we have Corey Spector from WAER Sports. Corey?
Thanks, Sue. John, Herm, thanks so much for taking the time. John, of course, we're still months away from competition starting, but I'm curious what discussions have been like recently about fans re-entering the Carrier Dome, and if they are not allowed to enter the Dome, what the fan experience could be like if that's the situation.
Corey, good question, and thank you. Yeah, we're still over 3 months away from our first home game, almost 100 days yet. And obviously, things are going to change over those 100 days, and we certainly hope that they continue to trend the way they have recently in this area. Just saw that we got cleared for phase 3 a couple of minutes ago before we started our press conference, before we started this one. So we're working on various models in terms of seating capacity, as every venue around the country, every venue around the ACC does. And also, additional health and safety protocols we've put into place yet. There's a lot of work, a lot of discussion going on that. Again, we've not made any definitive decisions or conclusions yet because we still have 100 days and there'll be a lot that we learn in that time. But we certainly, we certainly hope and that we can welcome fans in some way in the Dome.
Thanks, John.
Thanks,
Corey,
Corey.
do you have a follow-up, Corey?
Well, I was going to say, John, the number that keeps being thrown around a lot recently is 1/3 capacity in the arena or the venue. Has that been discussed at all?
Again, we're building various models, and you see around the country, some are 25%, 50%, 1/3, as you said, and we're just really doing our due diligence. There's a lot of communication, again, within the ACC in terms of what other schools are potentially looking at, but you really can't you can't state anything definitively at this point because there's still so much that we don't know that we will learn as we go forward.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks, John. Next, we'll go to Anthony DeBundo from the Daily Orange.
Hey, I have one question for each. I'll start with John. Other schools have announced that they're going to make Election Day a no practice or anything for athletics. Is Syracuse planning to do the same thing? Have you guys had conversations about that and trying to encourage your athletes to vote?
Anthony, we have had conversations. We had it Monday night with our student athletes and head coaches forum. We've had it with head coaches. We've not made any definitive decision yet, but we want to collectively, we want to create a plan for Election Day that may result in a day of no activity, but also what else can we do around Election Day? We've talked a little bit about voter registration, education, et cetera, that type of thing. So nothing definitive yet, but clearly being discussed.
And my question for Herm is, what experience do you have in the past, if any, in dealing with this kind of crisis? And what is the plan for if there is a positive test? How are those going to be announced?
I think that's a great question. First of all, I look at this position that I'm holding as this infection control officer, similar to the role I represented for athletics when we had the mumps on campus. So when we had the mumps on campus, I was the point administrator with our health department and relying on everything coming from them and applying those procedures to everything that we did protocol-wise for athletics. The other, when you ask me about experiences, at one point in time in my life, I was also in charge of the entire United States Olympic team. So as an administrator, I've been involved with all sorts of things. And In these particular instances, I kind of look at this as a hospital administrator. Sometimes the person who's in charge of the hospital isn't necessarily a doctor, but it's somebody who's been in charge of large operations and somebody who's been in charge as the administrator on how to deal with the day-to-day operations of something. And so in that particular regard, that's how I look at this position. The next part of your question, we have identified an entire infection response team. And those are the people who would be involved alongside myself. And that's when the scientists and the medical people become involved. And we have exact protocol on what happens if someone comes back with a positive test, starting with them going into the 14-day quarantine and other issues that we have to mark off to make sure we get that handled.
Quick follow-up, will those be announced, say X players test positive, or will they be kept in-house?
I'll let John answer that question for you.
Yeah, Anthony, I think, at this point we're going to keep things in-house the majority of the time, but again, there may be instances where we disclose, there's been some positives, but we've got to, we'll address that when we need to.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Anthony.
Next, we'll go to Mario Sacco from WSYR TV.
Hi, John and Herm. Thanks for joining us today. Couple of things. One being circling back to the stadium and the whole Carrier Dome. Are there talks with other companies to put a new name on that building at all?
No.
Second question being, athletics is such a large chunk, and you guys dealing with money and every day. How has this affected what's going on now, the athletic program?
I think we've been able to, when things shut down back in March, we were able to realize significant savings between that and the end of the academic year, because there was no competition, there was no travel, et cetera, that type of thing. Obviously, as you look ahead to the fall and in the winter, no question that for every Power 5 school in the country, the two major revenue sources are driven by football and men's basketball. In our instance, we also have revenue tied to women's basketball and men's lacrosse as well. But no question, and across the country in the athletics landscape is football and men's basketball are what generates the revenue, which fuels the rest of the athletics program, including our 18 other sports.
What steps are you going to have to take to help, eliminate some funding? Is it, maybe not playing teams away as far in your out of conference schedules, or, when do you take a look at if we might have to cut an athletic team?
Yeah, we've not looked and we've not discussed cutting a team, and that would be the absolute last resort. We have instituted cost savings measures across the department. We're looking, along with every other ACC school, how we travel, how we can travel more efficiently, how we can identify cost savings that way. I think you will see more regional non-conference competition across the country. You've already seen other conferences and schools announce that, and it's it's cost control is a paramount importance for us. Obviously, our 5 head coaches, Coach Babers and Boeheim, Hillsman, Gayton, Desco, and myself agreed to take a 10% reduction in salary for the next academic year. So we're constantly analyzing our costs and in identifying where we can realize savings at the same time as not do anything that compromises the experience and the support that we provide our student athletes.
Thank you.
And Mario, do you have anything for Herman?
Along those lines, where's the cost coming from to pay for testing, to pay for everything, the extra steps that have to be in place to get these athletes back out on the field?
Mario, all the testing and all the things that we're discussing right now, this is so important to us that we will absorb the cost because we would like to have our student athletes back here and we would like to have our teams competing. And I would just echo what John just said as well. As we look throughout the country and a lot of our Olympic sports, we will look at having more regional competition with those guys, with the exception of when they have to go to our conference competitions.
Thanks, Herm.
Thank you, Herman and John and Mario. Next, we'll go to Steve McGarrigy from the Associated Press.
Yes, I was just checking. Y'all had said that y'all weren't going to be announcing the numbers in terms of numbers of student athletes who test positive for COVID-19. It seems some schools are announcing numbers, others aren't. I'm just wondering what went into y'all's decision not to disclose, and just what kind of dilemma is that in terms of balancing the public's right to know during a pandemic versus student privacy issues with health and that stuff.
Thanks, Steve. Good question. I'm happy to answer that. We're gonna do everything we can to respect and protect the privacy rights of our student athletes, while at the same time understanding that you and your colleagues, this is a news item for you, and we're trying to arrive at the right space in the right way to do both. Thank you.
You have a follow-up, Steve?
That was pretty much, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Thank
Thanks,
you, Steve. Next, we'll go to Nico Tamurian from CNY Central.
John, Herm, how are you guys today?
Good. How are you,
Well,
Nico?
how about yourself?
Doing well. Good to see, even if it is over a screen. My first question is for John, and then I do have a follow-up that could really go to both of you. I know Herm does a lot of scheduling as well, but I'll start with you on this one, John, as far as, listen, obviously you mentioned it, phase 3 starts tomorrow in Central New York. We're certainly trending in the right direction. I'm not saying you're a scientist or anything, but how confident are you in the trajectory of things going and season starting on time? And are there contingency plans if something should arise and, the season for Syracuse can't start September 4th?
Yeah, Nico, thanks, and good questions. And I'm going to answer is, the ACC ADs in the conference office, we get together twice a week as a group, and then there's a football subcommittee that I'm on with 5 other ADs and 3 head coaches. And from the get-go, the number one priority is the health and safety of our student athletes and our staffs, right? Secondly is desire to be able to start fall competition on time for all our sports. But at the same time, as we have discussed in football, if there's a need, if we have to delay, et cetera, that type of thing, there's a truncated season, is ways that we could do that to maximize competition, the number of games we play, but also not do anything to compromise the health and safety of our student athletes or staff. And obviously that's all going to be dictated, by events and what happens in terms of COVID-19 moving forward. As you said, in this region of New York State, the Central New York region, we've been trending on the right path for a period of time now. So that certainly, I think, gives us all some encouragement as we look towards September 19th and our home opener.
Thank you. And the follow-up to that is, and I suppose most of the football schedule specifically is pretty regional, East Coast, or even your out-of-conference games or, Rutgers, Liberty, things like that. But is one of the contingency plans to even potentially schedule teams that aren't on the current schedule, or is it just one of those things, let's approach it and all options are on the table after that?
I'll let her take that initially.
Yeah, Nico, let me take a stab at that one. And you're absolutely correct. We're monitoring everything throughout the country, and more specifically, our non-conference games. And if for some particular reason, one of those teams can't fulfill their contractual obligation to come here and play us, then I'm looking at contingency plans. I hope I don't have to use any, but it's in the back of my head. And is there anything definite? No. But if we have to take a look at some things, we will do so.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer, guys. Thank you.
Nico, I think every school in the country is doing that, right? Is building various contingency models.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nico. Next, we'll go to Brent Axe from ESPN Radio.
Hi, gentlemen. Appreciate you doing this here today. My first question is for John. Maybe this has been push down the list a little bit, given everything that's going on. But what's the latest you can tell us right now, John, about the discussion about name, image, and likeness, and where Syracuse stands on that?
Brent, where that is name, image, and likeness is likely to be voted on at the January NCAA convention. And right now, the Power Five conferences are working and have requested federal legislation, which would then create a level playing field across all 50 states. Because if it's left at the state level, then you're going to have, different. You're going to have different governors, right? You're going to have different guardrails and guidelines in terms of what you can do and what you can't do. So for kind of, competitive equity, if there's one set of guidelines and legislation that applies across all 50 states and all schools, I think that's clearly desirable. Secondly, and I've stated in the past, is I'm in favor of athletes being able to profit off their name, image, and likeness. I think we need to help and guide them to make sure that they do it the right way. One of the concerns that, that has been voiced is, frankly, this does open up the opportunity for those who, frankly, who cut corners. Here's another corner they could potentially cut. And, you're never, that's been a part of college athletics for a long time. But I think if an individual student athlete can profit off their name, image, and likeness, I'm supportive of it, and we would want to help and work with them to make sure, that they do it in the right way. They're dealing with, reputable people who will be representing them.
Thank you, John. And my follow-up for Herm is, Herm, you touched on it a little bit, your experience with the Olympics and having seen the conversation through the years evolve on race and race relations and how sports kind of plays a role in that. My question is, what would your advice be to these current student athletes should they feel the need and the want to speak out and try and make a difference as the conversation takes another step forward here?
Thanks, Brent. No question they should speak out. And, I was fortunate when I went to the games in 1976 that the guys who boycotted and did some of the things down in Mexico City in 1968, Tommy Smith and John Carlos and some of those guys, and what they felt about the conditions in America back in the 60s. So those guys were kind of the people who were in my ear talking about all the things that we should try to do going forward on making athletes aware of how much power they do have, making athletes aware of how much they can make a difference as they continue to go throughout their sport. And a lot of times athletes take a step back because they're competing at that time and they don't want to affect their competition. And so what happens is once you're completed your career, then you normally get invited or you get involved in something of that nature. But I think now, even with what we're talking about on the NCAA level, as well as what we're talking about on national levels about image, license, opportunity for these kids to do things while they're still competing, I think all that's on the table right now.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Herm. Thanks, Brent. Next, we'll go to Stephen Bailey from Syracuse.com.
Hey guys, appreciate you doing this. Question for both John and Herm. Been thinking a little bit after your statements to open things regarding racial injustice and the role you two are in specifically in setting the table. Have you considered the series you guys have with Liberty? I know there's 2 more games supposedly on that. I think Jerry Falwell Jr. has made kind of his positions clear through the years. Is not scheduling games with them something you've considered? And even broadly speaking, when you schedule teams, is this now something you'll keep in mind?
Stephen, we have 2 years left on the deal. Besides us, There's a number of ACC teams who scheduled series with Liberty, Virginia Tech, North Carolina State, I believe North Carolina, SEC schools as well, the U.S. Military Academy. We are in no conversations to play beyond the current contractual arrangement and with Liberty.
Herm, I know you're actively involved in putting the schedule together. Is that something you thought about at the time, agreeing to that? Like, I understand whether a 2-for-1 makes sense to get those 2 home games, and I'm sure you've been under fire for maybe building a more balanced non-conference schedule. But is that something that you thought about? And as you're having these conversations now, in your mind, is that something you'd want to cut off?
Well, to go back to the first portion of your conversation, when we first scheduled them, no, we didn't think about some of the things you just mentioned, okay? And as we looked at scheduling them, we looked at the dates they had available versus the dates we had available. We looked at all the other schools within the conference that they were playing. And so at that point, it was going to be a perfect marriage for us. So we decided to go ahead and do it. And as John stated, we now have the ink on paper, and going forward, we'll look at it somewhat different.
And Steve, we filled out our non-conference schedule, for a number of years, and going forward now, as you look out, and Liberty's not been part of any of those conversations or discussions.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks, Stephen. Next, we'll go to Dakota Palmer from 247 Sports.
Hi, John. Hi, Herman. Thanks for holding this today. And even if it's virtually, good to see you as always. So my question first is for John. In your June 2nd statement, you didn't include the phrase Black Lives Matter. And I was just curious if there was a reason as to whether or not you omitted that. I know you reiterated your position today.
Yeah, I thought I wanted to reiterate in a stronger way today than I did initially. In convey to everyone, that Black Lives Matter, that 400 years of oppression, suppression is unacceptable. And this has to be a catalyst for systemic change in our society going forward. And every single person has a role to play and has to embrace the need for real systemic change. That again, a journey that will never end.
Mm-hmm. And my follow-up is for both of you. As you bring back student athletes and, assuming all sports seasons will be normal in the fall, in the winter, are you considering extra mental health resources for players, specifically Black players and, other players of color?
We do have mental health services available to all of our student athletes. We have designated staff that are housed in the athletics complex at Manly. We've also got a robust counseling and mental health services university-wide at the Barnes Center at the Arch. So we will use the resources that we have here as well as the resources that we have on campus to provide the support that is needed by any and all of our student athletes.
And Dakota, if I can add that we're closely monitoring everything that's going on within the football program right now as well. And we won't decide when to bring the remaining athletes back until we know everything is working properly within the football student athletes who are here currently. So that's important to us as we monitor all those things that are going on, because you do have COVID, you do have all of the protests and everything else that's going on. We want to make sure with all those different variables that we're in good shape once we bring these students back.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dakota. Next, we'll go to Mike Waters from Syracuse.com.
Gentlemen, good to see you again. John, you touched on it earlier about the fan experience or what fans can expect at games at the Carrier Dome in the fall. And as you're looking at various models, just what have you already kind of decided that fans might expect? Are they going to be required to wear a mask? Can they expect temperature checks? Anything along those lines?
Mike, good question. And I think the way I would answer that is we'll see how things progress and just kind of what the overall environment is, right? Is the overall environment is in 90 plus days that when we leave our homes is what we're wearing our mask publicly, then we'll adopt to whatever the appropriate protocols are is guided by guided by the county and by other organizations as well. So yes, it could include the wearing a mask. It could include temperature checks, but we're gonna take our cues off of the medical experts.
As a quick follow-up, does playing football games in a closed stadium, such as the Carrier Dome, pose any extra challenges for you as opposed to an open-air stadium?
Mike, a good question again. Not that we have been told at this time, no.
Thanks, John.
Anything for Herm, Mike?
No, I just wanted to ask John those two questions. I'm good. Hi, Herm.
Thanks, Mike. We'll go back to Steve McGarrigy from Associated Press for a quick follow-up. Steve?
Just back on the number of student athletes who test positive for COVID-19 and not reporting that. I was just how many people were involved in that decision, who was involved in that decision, and I assume you are reporting it to some sort of local, state, federal, some sort of health organization, the number of people who do test positive. And I didn't know who that gets reported to and how many people were involved in the decision not to report it to the general public.
Steve, there was dialogue with a number of people within the university that we had. So this was not, we sought input and received input from a number of colleagues across campus. In terms of there are positives, yes, we certainly would report to the Onondaga Health Commission. Correct, Herm?
That is correct. That's part of the protocol.
Thanks, Steve. Next, we'll go to Trish Kilgannon from Spectrum News.
Hi, guys. John, I have a question for you. What's the status of the dome construction, and what's the next thing that fans will be able to see when they're driving by?
Yeah, it's good question. It's on schedule, so that's the great news, Trish. So that's the most important thing. A lot of work being done internally, et cetera, that type of thing, all to be prepared for later this summer when we install the new roof, and then once that's up, then it's the center hung scoreboard, new lighting, new sound, et cetera, that type of thing. But I think the key headline to take away is we're right on course right now.
When will that roof start to go up? When will we see that? And how has COVID at all impacted the construction?
Trish, I don't have that specific date, and maybe Sue can follow up with Pete Sala for you on that. COVID-19, fortunately, we were deemed an essential construction project when the virus first impacted. So, that it did not have a tremendous impact on the timing and completion of the project.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Trish.
Thanks, Trish. Anything for Herman, Trish?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll go to Matt Hausworth from CNY Central.
Hey, John, Herm, how you doing?
Good. Hey, Matt.
Doing well, Matt.
Good. John, this question's for you. There's been no athletic director at Syracuse University who's had to deal with a time like this and try to navigate these choppy waters. My question to you is, how have you learned to embrace this, maybe change your habits a little bit on how you've been managing people, managing a department, and how you've done so moving forward, and obviously navigating this new normal going into the fall?
Thanks, Matt. Well, we've all had to change, right? And this is a great example of this, as opposed to being in a football auditorium. We're doing it via Zoom. I'm really thankful and appreciative of our entire athletic staff, and a particular shout out to our head coaches. They've been fantastic through this. We've tried to communicate on a regular and consistent basis with the full staff, with our senior staff, with our head coaches, to keep people in the know, because there's so much speculation out there, is where we can provide clarity, I think is important, to provide support for everyone and their families. This is a real trying time. And, you know, I wanted to convey to everyone, and including our student athletes. I sent numerous, letters, via our TeamWorks platform to our student athletes after the spring break, when they couldn't return to campus. And I wanted them to know that we were here and here to support them. We transitioned, I think, very well to the virtual environment. Our academic support services, I think we were ahead of the vast majority of schools in the country, because we had planned, we kind of read the tea leaves that we thought there might be a pretty good chance that in-person education instruction wouldn't make it through the end of second semester. So Tommy Powell and his team started working on a virtual program probably 2.5, 3 weeks before we were officially shut down. So I think, again, communication with people, being accessible different ways, right? And care for everybody, and for them and their families. And, it all starts with individuals' health and their wellness, and then it kind of flows from there. But I'm really thankful for our staff. I'm thankful for our head coaches. I'm thankful to our student athletes.
Herm, I'd like to follow up with you. Just how have you grown as a leader during a time like this, and obviously so many people in this department looking up to you as well?
Well, Matt, for me, this is 40 plus years in athletic administration. And one of the things that I always tell the younger staff, when you run into an incident like this, it's not in the AD playbook, okay? And so you have to figure out exactly what you have to do. And John hit it right on the head. You have to have communication. You have to be prepared for anything that can happen. So during this entire time, even though the university was shut down, I've been in this office every morning from about 8:30 till about 12 or 1 or so. But you come to work thinking you're going to do XYZ, but then you end up doing ABC. It just changes constantly. You have to be prepared. No way did I think I would be involved in having tables inside the door when you walk in with a temperature, hand sanitizer and cleaner, buildings shut down, people having to ask for permission to be able to come into the office, so forth and so on. And it helps you grow as a person. It also makes you pretty much happy about the profession that you've chosen, because again, we're out there servicing these student athletes, servicing our staff, and I think they are probably in a position where they appreciate a lot of the things that have happened. And I think the university as a whole has been good to our staff on communicating and also trying to keep people safe during this special time.
Great, thank you guys.
Thanks, Matt. I apologize, I missed John Kikis. He does have a question, so go ahead, John. John, we need you to unmute.
I thought you did that. Okay. I know we're early in this, but there are so many different scenarios that you could face. Have you thought at all about what would happen if, say, the head coach was afflicted with COVID-19 and what would happen?
Thanks, John. I mean, I'll take that. I think, again, part of what you do here is scenario planning, across the board. So if I spent a lot of time speaking specifically with Coach Babers about it, no, I haven't. If I thought about it, naturally, of course, I have. But this is part of the reality of what we live in. There's so much that's unknown, right? And It's why we're also doing everything that we can, and we placed an absolute premium on people taking care of themselves. All of our staff, our coaching staffs, our support staff, and all our student athletes. It's why that we have the very thorough and comprehensive protocol in place that Herm described a little bit earlier, to do everything that we can to prevent infection.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Next, we'll go to Nate Mink from Syracuse.com.
Thanks, guys. I have a few follow-ups. Herm, piggybacking off one of Donna's questions about testing, I'm wondering, and I understand we're at June 11th here, but I'm wondering if there's a plan that's been committed to for in-season testing yet, and what that might look like, particularly as it pertains to testing before a game and after a game.
Yes, Nate, we have definitely spoken about that. And I suspect we will test during the week of games. And as John mentioned earlier, he's involved with some other members of the conference, that there could be some conference-wide things we take a look at. But more importantly, for SU, we're probably going to test our kids prior to games.
And John,
Nate, I'm just going to follow up 1 second on what Herm said. That's why, I think it would be really good if there is a baseline protocol established by the ACC, right? In ACC schools for all competitions, so that it creates, defined requirements that every school would need to adhere to during the week of play leading up to the day of competition.
And then John, to follow up on one of Mike's questions about carrier dome capacity and things of that nature, I don't know where, season ticket holders, what that number looks like right now. Obviously, you had a successful run last year in bringing a lot of people on board. Is there a possibility people who have purchased season tickets already either will not be allowed into the game, or will some season ticket holders have to be moved from the location that they picked out?
Nate, all to be determined. Obviously, if the only way we could have competition without fans, which nobody wants to do, but if that was the only way to do it, then all right, that's obvious what that answer is. What we placed our priorities on is, if we do have limited capacity, is our season ticket holders, our premium seat holders, and our student season ticket holders. And I think students are really, really important part of this experience. And obviously, as Chancellor Severud has said many times publicly, we are planning and working every single day to have in-person instruction this fall. In working along with those guidelines, our students are an important part. So it's kind of three constituents: our season ticket holders, premium seat holders, and student season ticket holders. They're 1A, 1A, and 1A to me in terms of importance.
And then I just had a much more complex question here. I guess to what extent will the university or athletic department financially be responsible for an outbreak? Are they going to be liable for that? Is the university going to take on that liability, or will athletes have to or be asked to sign a waiver that will excuse the university from taking on those added costs, whether it's insurance premiums or in the event of an outbreak?
Yeah, in terms of the legalities, Nate, I would defer to our general counsel's office on that. But one of the things, it's why we put the protocol in place that we've done, and why we solicited input from so many professionals across campus, and also we previewed our plans with the Onondaga Health Commission with Dr. Gupta. Is we want to create, not only for student athletes but for all our students. Again, having campus instruction, we want to create as safe as an environment as we possibly can, and for everyone, for students, for staff, anyone who's associated with the university.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nate.
Nate.
And to wrap things up today, thank you for being patient. We have Danny Emmerman from the Daily Orange.
Thanks, Sue. John, like you and Herman both said, this is obviously an incredibly tough, dark time in our country and in the world too. In these past few weeks around college sports, there have been a few high-profile incidents of universities disciplining athletes or coaches for racial slurs that they'd made in the past. It's happened at Utah and Oregon State and a few other places. Does Syracuse have a policy in place for either athletes or coaches making or having made racist remarks? And does any of these recent incidents change Charlotte DeVries' status as a student athlete at Syracuse?
It does not change Charlotte's status as a student right now. We do have very specific expectations of our students once they enroll at Syracuse. We do we have extensive expectations of our staff as well. In Charlotte's case, this was an event that occurred in high school, her junior year. She showed immediate remorse, immediately underwent education, sensitivity training, which she continued throughout high school. Before she was admitted, I discussed her situation with a number of colleagues on campus leaders, both white and black. Ultimately, admissions makes the decision, and anyone who is admitted to Syracuse. But you know, when you're here as a student and you're here as a member of the athletic department, there clearly are specific expectations which apply to all of us.
What were some of those discussions like with your colleagues in terms of admitting Charlotte, and who were they with?
There were a number, again, across the campus, a number of leaders across campus, and a diverse group of leaders. One of the things that I heard from every single person is they were all supportive of admitting Charlotte. Admissions did a very, very extensive interview with her. Coach Bradley talked to her team before he moved anything forward. So it was vetted very thoroughly. And we received input from, again, a wide number of colleagues across campus. And ultimately, again, is with anyone who applies to Syracuse University, admissions, they make the final call. I think sometimes there's a thought out there that, you know, the coach can call admissions or the athletic director call admissions, and that doesn't happen here at Syracuse. As a matter of fact, since Varsity Blues, we've put in specific protocol in place. Coaches are not allowed to talk to the admissions office. I don't talk to the admissions office directly. And all has been put in to prevent anything even closely associated with Varsity Blues. And that was the catalyst for us to really be one of the leaders in terms of making sure that there was a very clear protocol in terms of who talked to admissions, and equally important, who doesn't.
Thank you. I have a question for Herman too, on a completely separate subject, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
So Herman, how can you give the public confidence in your role that competition won't affect how players will be treated in terms of if they test positively? For instance, if Tommy DeVito tests positively compared to if a walk-on has a positive COVID test.
Daniel, right?
Yes.
Daniel, anybody who knows me will tell you I am straight across the board as anybody you will ever meet. I will not cut corners for the star versus the person who's a non-star. And I think one of the most important things for me, Daniel, is you have to have values and you have to make the right decisions. And in this particular instance, if X player is positive, the X player is still going to have some kind of contamination to the other people who are on that team. And so I would not be in this position if I'm going to make a decision like that.
And Danny, let me just add on is first of all, there's no one has more integrity than Herm. Okay. And I've been in the sports profession for 4 decades, and there is no one who has the integrity of Herm Frazier, and no one who I trust more than Herm Frazier. Not only would Herm not do anything like that, I won't do anything like that, and none of our coaches would do anything like that. The health and safety of our student athletes, of our staff, of every student on this campus is of paramount importance. Full caps, quotation, exclamation points.